I have made some pretty bad cakes before, like really bad. I usually make cakes for my siblings, but never before had I made a cake for myself. During my birthday month, I asked myself, hey, why not make a cake for myself? My current fixation is Ensemble Stars. Specifically, I'm a fan of the group Undead, so I had the bright idea to make an Undead cake for myself to enjoy. Before I slapped some things together and called it a day, I wanted to sit down and illustrate my idea and think of how I can make the perfect Undead cake for myself. Some of the things I wanted the cake to have were the characters, their image color, purple, and bats based on their logo. To get the purple color, I decided to make an ube cake. Using ube flavoring makes this very rich and deep purple color that is pretty similar to Undead's image color, so I instantly decided to use this flavor. The frosting's intention was to complement the ube flavor, so I decided I would whip up some heavy whipping cream, add some sugar, and make my own frosting-like imitation that isn't overly sweet. Last thing I had to figure out was how I was going to be adding the characters to the cake. I really wanted to add the members of Undead, especially Ray, so I had to come up with some sort of idea. What I came up with was making some cookies and drawing Undead using edible markers and edible paints. And lastly, I would be decorating the cake with a big bat on top to represent one of the key elements in Undead's logo. I found this neat recipe to make my own colored powdered sugar, so I'd be giving that a try with some black food coloring. I created a pretty solid plan and researched so many recipes for this cake. I even recorded the entire process because I was so proud of how much thought I had given this mini project. Let's get started with the baking. My baking adventure started on a Friday night where I decided I would be baking the cookies first and then make my cake layers. The recipe I followed is this sugar cookie recipe I found online. The recipe itself calls for flour, baking soda, baking powder, salt, sugar, unsalted butter, egg, and vanilla extract. I've had all of the measurements in order to make less cookie dough since I only needed 4 cookies minimum. Alright, let's get mixing. First things first, you gotta start by creaming the butter and sugar together. So let me just get my butter out here to start mixing that. Big warning, I do not advise mixing using your bare hands in normal circumstances. If you have a stand mixer, please, for the love of all things, use that instead. I am not a professional, and this cake was only for me. I washed my hands beforehand too, I promise. Please ignore the use of my hands. I am just a barbarian pretending to know how to make a cake. Anyway, mix the butter and sugar. I recommend using room temperature butter since it's easier to soften up. Oh, and also read your measurements correctly, especially if you're having a recipe, so you don't have to remove portions that you had already started mixing, like I did. This recipe called for egg too, so I added it to my mixture and mixed it all together. If you're not used to mixing ingredients with your hands, you probably won't enjoy the feeling, but I really do, not gonna lie. Anyway, you mix this all together until it's well incorporated and looks more liquidy. By the way, if you see another set of hands, that's my soup chef. Yes, I know sous chef is for the professional cooks and I'm baking, but that's why I'm calling this person assisting me my soup chef. Anyway, next thing you throw into your bowl are the rest of the wet ingredients, so vanilla extract. And if you know baking, you know you mix the wets and dries in separate bowls before mixing them together. So I mix together the flour, baking soda, and baking powder in a separate bowl before combining the 2 bowls together. Mix them together and you got your cookie dough. I, with my soup chef, floured everything down. We pre-washed our surfaces too, trust, and rolled the dough out for the cookies. I didn't really know what I was doing, so I made some cookies using a cookie cutter and also made some cookie dough balls. Let's see what happens with those. I baked those bad boys for about 10 minutes, but I did leave them in my oven for much longer than that, to be honest. That will be relevant later. Cookies are done and cooling, so let's move on to the cake. I was making specifically an ube chiffon cake using this recipe I found online. This recipe would call for cake flour, sugar, baking powder, salt, eggs, both together and also separate egg whites and yolks, water, canola oil, ube extract, and cream of tartar. Yes, I know it's pronounced tartar. Same old drill, you mix the dries and wets separately before adding it all together. However, what was special about this recipe, since it's specifically a chiffon cake I am making, I would mix a third bowl with the cream of tartar and egg whites to make this whipped mixture. I would then mix all of this together. Now, I gotta admit, I really didn't look into making chiffon cakes all too much, so I didn't really know what I was doing. The recipe said, quote, "Handle carefully so as not to deflate the air out of your egg whites," end quotes. Didn't know what that meant, so I just mixed it all together. Spoiler, this will affect my cake later. Now we divvy up the mixture between 2 cake pans, which my soup chef added some secret messages to when she sprayed them, and plopped those bad boys into the oven to bake. It was 1 a.m. once everything had finished baking. I had planned to ice the now cooled cookies and have the cakes cool overnight. However, I discovered an interesting problem with my cookies. They were hard as a rock. Some of them were also pretty burned on the bottom. So yeah, it looked like things weren't looking good. But it was 1 a.m. so I didn't really care. I iced the cookies, covered everything up, and went to bed to prepare for day 2. Day 2 started with making my frosting / icing for the cakes. I make my own type of frosting with a recipe I whipped up by myself. It's basically just heavy whipping cream and powdered sugar mixed together. So yeah, it's nothing fancy, but it gets the job done. Again, no stand mixers, I gotta whip it with my own lack of strength. Haha, just kidding, I have this weak little handheld mixer, but it kinda gets the job done. Except when you make a mess like I did. I would be whipping 2 sets of whipped cream. One would be plain white whipped cream and the other would be purple. I even bought some purple food coloring to get the right color. Or so I thought. Turns out I don't bother reading packages and bought some blue food coloring. But look at the packaging. Doesn't this look like it would be purple food coloring? Whatever, at least I know basic color theory and mix red into my blue to make purple whipped cream. Not as dark as I wanted it to be, but I got it purple. Now for the fun part, frosting the cakes. I even bought a turntable to make this easier for me. Quick time lapse of that because this part made me happy. My cake is frosted, so now I gotta mix up some black powdered sugar for my bad image, but that didn't really work. Whatever, I'm tired. I stayed up until 1 a.m. and woke up early, so I'm just gonna use what I got. I made a bad stencil and placed it on the cake, sprinkled some powdered sugar. So now let's look at the beautiful bad image I made with my stencil. Okay, well it took some of the frosting off. But that's fine, right? Because it's cookie decorating time. Except, when I iced my cookies at 1 a.m., I didn't make sure to ice them evenly, so I had to work around some weird bumps. Not everything has been going right, so would I even be able to draw the Undead members like I had planned? Wish Koga good luck, and got to decorating. Alright, he turned out pretty cute. With my confidence back, I quickly drew the rest of the members. I gotta say, they all turned out pretty cute and much better than I had anticipated. Here's some close-ups. Just ignore the poorly laid icing though. I'll be honest, I was pretty tired by this point and just wanted to be finished, so I just kinda laid those cookies on top of the cake so I could get a picture and quick video. All in all, it turned out okay looks-wise, but the cake tasted great. Ube tastes really good, and the frosting I whipped complemented the taste well. The texture was really weird because chiffon cake is very difficult to make if you don't know how to properly incorporate and mix the egg whites into the cake mix, which I obviously don't, so my cake came out pretty dense. It was so dense I broke some plastic forks trying to eat this thing. Anyway, how would I rate this cake experience? Taste-wise, I give myself an 8.8 out of 10. Looks-wise, I deserve like a 4 out of 10. The cookies are what's pulling all the weight here, and they weren't even that great looking, to be honest. Will I make another ambitious cake like this one? Probably not soon. Maybe once I get better tools like a stand mixer and learn a bit more about baking, especially decorating. But all in all, I'm really happy with this project, and thank you for watching. Bruh, my powdered sugar turned into a different color the next day. How?